Okay, so you're here for some great church leadership content. The podcast is great, but there's also another piece of content you need to be enjoying each week. It is the Leading Saints email newsletter. Now, I get it. Email newsletters feel so 2006, you know? But it isn't as old-fashioned as you might think. It's actually one of the most popular pieces of content that Leading Saints produces. Each week, I share a unique leadership thought that can only be found in the newsletter. I keep it short and sweet. Most can read it in less than 5 minutes. And then we share with you recent content you might have missed, throwback episodes, and Leading Saints events that happen more often than you might anticipate. If you want to make sure you are on the email list, simply visit leadingsaints.org/14. That's leadingsaints.org/14. That will also get you 14 days access to our full library of content not available to the general public. So look for Leading Saints in your inbox by going to leadingsaints.org/14 or click the link in the show notes. If you wanted further insight into a Come Follow Me lesson, you'd probably search in YouTube or get the We Believe app. Tough church history questions? You'd reach out to the B.H. Roberts Foundation. But what if you wanted to learn to be a better leader? Well, I'm glad you asked. You'd come to Leading Saints. That's why we exist, to help Latter-day Saints be better prepared to lead by being familiar with others' leadership experiences, understand the latest leadership research, and finding a community to share ideas. That's why I'm glad you found the Leading Saints podcast. We hope you will dive into the archives and visit leadingsaints.org to find out what are the top, most listened to episodes on the podcast. Welcome. You're going to love it. All right, recording live from Aspen Grove, Utah. We're here with a live studio audience. Let's hear it. Very good, very good. So we are in the midst of a Leading Saints retreat called Zion Camp. And if you didn't know about it, you should listen to the podcast more because I pounded it over your head for a while and in the newsletter and whatnot. And so it's actually happening. So we're in October 17th, 2023. And we're here. We got one more day of the retreat. And how's it going so far?
Great.
Yes. All right. And I thought it'd be fun to record an interview while we're here with a live audience and people who actually care other than my mother. So we'll do it. Now, we have a special guest. I'm not going to introduce him yet, but who in the room could introduce our guest? Who's maybe talked with him? You want to come do it? We got a mic up here. Come on up and introduce George.
George is a doctor.
Well, you got to first introduce yourself, if you want.
Well, I'm not that important.
Well, I mean,
My name's Tammy. Hi.
Where are you from, Tammy?
I'm from Salem, Oregon.
Nice. And this is your second Leading Saints retreat.
It is. The
Nice.
first one was just so good, I couldn't help it. I had
There
to
you
back.
go. Maybe there'll be a third. I don't know.
There
Right?
better be.
Okay. Well, we'll get it done. All right. Back to George.
Back to George. George is a doctor. He currently lives in Florida. Now I sound like I'm announcing a game show. And George has 11 children.
Really? George, I didn't know that. Oh, we got a lot to talk about.
He's got some amazing stories, and he's a smart man, and he's funny, and you're going to love it.
Okay. Is that all accurate, George?
It's all that, well, I don't know about funny, but
I was laughing.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tammy. Now, George, when we put a retreat together, there's sort of a demographic we expect to show up, but you're 87 years old, right?
right.
And so why a Leading Saints retreat? What appealed to you about it?
When I first read the flyer, it made, I'm sure the flyer didn't say that, but it sounded like this was going to be a group of weirdos.
And you were right.
And
It is funny. That is so true. All right.
I tell people that I have spent my life living outside the box, trying to convince them that I'm inside the box.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounded like this was going to be a group of people who were also trying to live outside the box and accomplish change.
Uh-huh.
And I'm always for change. Every place I've ever worked probably has had to put bridles on me because I've always got ideas and trying to change.
Yeah. So that's interesting. You said you're outside the box trying to convince others you're inside the box.
Trying to convince people
Okay.
that I'm living inside.
Tell me
the
more
box.
about that. Like, does an example come to mind, an experience, whether work or church or whatever?
Well, I try to be very conventional at church, but in the background, I'm usually doing something that is trying to change the way we deal with people. I'm very aware of people who are on the fringes of the church and trying to show them how they can fit in, and that what they're trying to do is good and they just need to stick with it.
Yeah. Would you say you were, throughout your life, you were always like that?
Yes. Well, when I was just very bullheaded and just kept hitting my head against the wall. And I can remember very clearly, I had gone to Florida to do my internship, and I received the Melchizedek priesthood there. I hadn't been a member of the church very long.
So what age were you at this point?
About 23.
Okay. So convert to the church in your early 20s?
Yes.
Okay.
And it really changed my life. And I began to see that there was another way. And by putting Christ in my life, it caused me to think differently. And so I started trying to learn and not just butt heads with people. And it's taken a long time.
Yeah. Even at 87, maybe you haven't mastered it completely.
I'm still working on it.
All right.
My bishop will tell you that, what's he doing here again?
And what do you mean by that? Like, what's that experience?
God has given me a really interesting brain. I have really severe dyslexia.
Oh, really?
And so I read maybe 25 books my whole life.
Really? Even you made it through med school and everything.
I made it through med school.
Wow.
It was very difficult. And as I look back on it, the hand of God was really there. So I don't read, but I have a brain that if you give me a problem, and I can probably come up with 17 solutions to it. So I'm always at the bishop's office with a new idea.
Or 17.
Or 17.
Nice.
And
that's interesting. Just as I've talked with you, offline here, just hearing your engagement and how, didn't you say, like, as you found this retreat, you sort of said, these are my people, like,
yes.
Right? Like you identify as someone who is a natural leader, right? Or how would you phrase it?
I don't really think of myself as a leader, but today, I think, has made me feel more like a leader.
Like today being here?
Yes.
Tell me more about that. What do you mean by that?
The exercise where people came and said what they had noticed about me was different.
It was powerful?
Very powerful.
Did you feel like they were saying things to you you've known all along, but just to hear it from somebody else, maybe it confirmed that?
To some degree, but I don't really think of myself as a real leader. I do usually try to stay in the background because people don't like too many ideas all at once. And they've got an idea, and so I usually just kind of wait and see how it turns out.
Yeah. And that maybe goes back to that bullheadedness you've sort of figured out how to temper a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So at 87 years old, I think a lot of people in your demographic, your peers, they feel the sense of, the term is feeling out to pasture, right? Like, George, you've lived a good life. You've had sort of your career, your high points of maybe influence in the church. And do you feel that at times that you're sort of out at pasture?
Oh, no. And I tell the bishop, whenever they call a new bishop, I usually go in and tell him I may be, 87 or whatever, and I'm not through. Don't classify me as old. I can still do whatever needs to be done, and I want to do it. And if you don't find something for me to do, I'll find it myself. And I retired from practicing medicine about a year ago.
Wait a minute. You're 86 years old when you retired?
Yeah.
And did they, or everybody was good with that? Like, or was that a hard thing were they sort of helping you maybe think about retirement?
No.
They were good about it, huh?
I had offers to work since, and it's been hard to turn it down. I practiced for 65 years. And
oh, my goodness.
So it's kind of in my nature, and you can probably ask, I've given medical advice to people here.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's hard to stop.
Yeah. And what type of medicine did you practice?
I was trained as a family practitioner, and I did something called functional medicine, which is studying cellular physiology, looking at things from a cellular viewpoint rather than a symptomatic viewpoint. So
identifying as like this leader, did you have more formal experiences of leadership in the church, bishoprics or anything like that?
I've been a counselor in the bishopric a couple of times. I think I learned the most from being executive secretary a couple of times. And that was my favorite calling because you have all the power and no responsibility.
Yeah. You're the gatekeeper,
You're the
right?
Gatekeeper, right.
Nice.
And
you did that a few times, or?
I did it twice.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And you bounced around the country in your career, you mentioned to me, right?
Yes. Yeah. I lived in China for 3 years, and I worked and was the CEO of the hospital there. And I've worked in Boston. I set up this was my favorite job. I set up ICUs in people's homes, and you can imagine that's expensive. And there's no feeling exactly like having somebody give you a credit card with no limit on it. And
wow.
It's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah. Interesting. So why, this little tangent here, I guess, but why ICUs in a home?
These were family members who were critically ill.
Okay. And they had the funds to do that. Okay.
To set up the ICUs. And so I bought all the equipment and trained all the personnel.
Now, you recently returned from mission service. Tell me about that.
My wife and I served in the Tampa mission office, and she did the finances, and I did housing.
And were you also the doctor for the missionaries, or
no? I gave a little bit of advice, but not too much. They had a nurse, and they have a doctor, for each mission, and so I didn't have to get too involved. I would have liked to have gotten more involved, because with functional medicine, we could have done a lot, particularly with the missionaries with emotional problems and things like that.
Did you see a lot of that?
A lot.
Yeah. How did that usually manifest, or how were you aware of that?
Depression. You could see it in their eyes. You could tell when they were really having trouble, because we were in the mission office, they were always coming through, and so we got to know a lot of them. Yeah.
And so your responsibilities were over housing?
Just housing, doing leases and finding apartments and things like that.
And is that your first mission then?
That's our first mission.
Great. And what encouragement you give to maybe people in their 80s looking to do that?
The energy that you feel from the young missionaries, it's just wonderful. They're so full of energy and enthusiasm, and we learned a new language.
Oh yeah, from the missionaries, or
from the missionaries?
well, share that language with us.
It's left me already, but just I learned how you do some sort of salute like that. That's supposed to be a really, I understand, I get you, I'm with you,
gotcha.
sort of thing. So they all laughed because, this old man is
saluting them.
So
that's great.
So
nice. And that was when you lived at your home.
We lived at
because you lived just south of Tampa, right? Or north? Just north of. Okay. What's the name of your city?
Port Richey.
Okay, cool. And so you were able to commute in, and
we did.
And it was a huge disruption of your life, but you could still experience a great mission.
Well, we pretty much shut down all of our other activities and focused just on the mission.
Yeah. Yeah. So take me back to, some principles some epiphanies that have stood out here and you applying in your life as far as like, what is that the day to day other than connecting with your bishop and sharing ideas and whatnot? Like, how do you be a leader without being formally called as a leader?
Well, I adopted what we've been told. The Blue Book is just a guideline. It's not something you have to follow. Mm-hmm. And I found that bishops, they're swamped. If you do something and you set it up and you get it working, and then you go and ask the bishop's permission, he's most likely to say yes because he just didn't have time to say no.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I've done.
Yeah.
And just picked an area or an idea that, this is my chance.
Go for it, George.
So I'm trying to build unity in our ward. And I think we need, back in the old days when we used to have dinners to raise funds to build the chapel.
Yeah, the building fund, right?
The building fund.
I've often thought about, I want to do an episode where I gather a bunch of 80s bishops and just talk about like, what was it like? What did the checkbook look like, right? Or the building funds, because back when my dad was a bishop, he had to stand in front of the ward and say, we got to pay utilities, folks, right?
Right. You had not only the building fund, but we paid a certain percentage of the utilities. And
on top of your 10% tithe, right?
On top of the tithing,
wow.
Yeah. But the unity that we had was really great because we gathered so often to do activities, to raise the funds, that the side benefit was something that I think is really missing today, the getting together so often. I was
encouraged by Elder Gong's recent General Conference talk. He sort of alluded to this as far as like encouraging activities and whatnot. And really, this is a general problem that I think a lot of wards face. I mean, I think many of you would say in this room, is your ward need some help with unity? Yeah, right. And so, keep going.
So I've got a lot of ideas, but the one that I'm really promoting is, about worm charming?
I'm lost, George. Tell me about worm charming. Anybody here?
Yeah, everybody knows.
Okay. Brenton. Okay.
You're the first people that I've ever talked to.
Well, these are your people, George. So
That's true. That's true. So what you do is you get a stick and you carve notches in it. And then you have another stick and you put the first stick down into the ground about 8 to 12 inches. And then you rub the stick up and down the notches, and it creates a vibration in the earth that is similar to a mole going through the ground looking for earthworms. And so the worms know that vibration, and so they pop up to the grass, and you pick up the worms.
We've taken the Leading Saints podcast to a whole nother level. I'm like so fascinated. Okay.
So everybody out there, we're going to have a national contest. There is actually the International Federation of Worm Charming. And
and you're the president, right, George? Is that, no?
It's my aspiration.
Okay, all right. We got a long life ahead of you. So
so you mark off a 3 square foot plot. You have the team. You have the grubber who rubs the stick. You have the collector, and then the counter. And you have 30 minutes.
Do you have to do this a certain time of day, or
no? You can do it anytime.
So they're scared of the gopher?
Moles.
Of the moles, okay.
Of the moles. And so you, at the end of the 30 minutes, you count up the worms, and the team with the most worms wins the contest.
Olympic sport, folks. Okay, good. All right, so keep going. Yeah, bring us back.
So this is, in England, it's a big sport. And
really?
There's a town in Florida that does it, and they usually have an attendance of about 5,000 people. So this is a little-known, great sport.
Now, and it's not just a sport, but they're harvesting the earthworms to fish, or what?
No, this actually used to be an occupation in the South.
Okay.
Women could actually support their family by doing this worm grubbing.
Wow.
And so once they invented plastic worms, the occupation kind of died out, although there's still some women who do it.
Wow. All right, so take us here to ward unity. I'm sort of like, where?
So we're going to have some food trucks, and we're going to have we're going to invite the town, and we're going to get, some other activities. Oh, and one thing I've thought about was we're going to have a contest, parade for the children, and the best worm costume wins. And,
the audience demands pictures, George. So send them our way.
So that's the sort of thing. I don't have to ask the bishop about that. You can just
go do it, right?
I've got a publicity chairman, and we're going to try to do it.
So is this a publicity chairman from your ward, or
from the ward?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and you have approached the bishop about it, or you're just going to do it, or
once I got everybody in place and I got the rules and got an idea of what we were going to need to do, then I went to the bishop and said, "This is what I'd like to do," and he said, "Okay, worm grubbing."
And so you have this on the calendar, and
we're at the stage. I did involve the ward activities committee because I didn't want to clash with anything else, and so she's supposed to be setting up the date as we speak.
Wow! And do you have an official calling in the ward?
They didn't know exactly what to do with us, so we've been called as ward missionaries, but we're functioning under the bishop and not the ward missionary leader. And so I figure that gives me the right to do just about anything.
Yeah. Sounds like it. Even worm grubbing. So, tell me about your wife. Like, what is your wife along the same vein, or?
No, she's Italian. She's very traditional. She's a good wife.
How long have you been married?
9 years.
Okay. Second marriage?
Second marriage.
Okay.
And she really is tolerant because pretty much everything I do is different. And she had a very traditional first marriage. And so she's kind of, we're going to do that.
And she's a lifelong member, or?
No. That's a story. Well, I guess you can cut it out if it's too long. But
here we go.
I did obstetrics, and she had her first child by C-section, and she wanted to have a home birth for the second. And so I was doing home births, and so she came to me, and I was present. I usually say I helped her deliver it, but she wants to make clear that she delivered it. And I was just there.
Attending.
So then that daughter grew up to be, we were in the same stake, and she wasn't a member at the time. But
and obviously this was long before your marriage.
Long before.
Okay.
Yeah, 37 years. So she had the missionaries come to the door, but they'd never paid any attention to them. But because of our relationship, and she knew I was a member of the church, she invited them in, and she and her whole family joined.
Wow.
And so then it was about 33 years later that we were both divorced, and she was in Florida, and she called me. And, well, if there's do single people listen to this?
Every once in a while. Yeah.
So I used to go to the wards, and I'd go to the bishop and I'd say, "My name is George Wootan. I'm single. I'm looking for a wife. Do you have any women in your ward that would like to date?"
He's a charmer.
It's a great pickup line.
Yeah, and obviously it worked, I'm assuming.
So I was in Florida, and I was going to go to a town called Largo, and because I'd heard there were a lot of single women there. And I sat down at the computer to get the address, and I got this impression, go to Odessa. I don't want to go to Odessa. It's outside my stake. I prefer to stay inside the stake. Go to Odessa. So I go to Odessa, and the bishop, I gave him my line, and he said, okay, he'd think about it. And, the next week he came by, and he said, "Well, I thought there was one woman that would be interested, but she's just not interested in dating right now." So I look up and I say, "Okay, I'm here." He said, "Come here." So I went to Sunday school, and the Sunday school teacher was really a neat lady. Was very nicely dressed, knew the gospel. She had served 2 missions with her husband, was just an ideal person. And so I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden in my head goes off this light, birds of a feather flock together. So I went up after Sunday school. My name is George Wootan. I'm single. I'm looking for a wife. Do you have any friends that would be interested in dating? And her eyes got kind of big. And I said, well, you can talk to your bishop, because he's called my bishop. And
he's clear, folks. Yeah.
And so she said she'd think about it. And so the next week she said, well, I do have a couple of friends that are interested, but my daughter-in-law knows this lady up in Orlando that she thinks would be perfect for you. And she's going to text her, and if she's interested, she'll give you her phone number. And so she texted her, and the way she described me, Lucretia knew who I was. And
I imagine you hadn't really had contact for decades, right?
Yeah, we hadn't had any.
But just remembered who you were.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, she described me as a doctor with 11 children who practices some weird kind of medicine.
not too many of those running around. Huh? Nice.
So she knew who I was. So we met, and 9 days later we were engaged, and we got married a couple of months after that.
Oh, that's sweet. Wonderful. And so going back to this, your wife sometimes just puts up with this eagerness to get out there and serve and lead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Any other, I'm intrigued by these ideas. I know you have a lot of ideas. We can't go through them all, but what other ideas have you found effective and just in your informal role as a leader?
Well, one of the things I got off of one of your podcasts, and I don't remember who it was, but he talked about inviting families to feed the missionaries. And if they weren't economically able to do it, they provided the food from the bishop's storehouse. So we've started that program.
Wow.
And
so what does that look like? Like, how do you facilitate that?
That's my role, is to contact the families, find the families. I've got somebody who's going to coordinate the calendars, because we're going to try to do this just with part member families and inactives. Then I've got 5 or 6 people that are going to help support the program, and we'll see. We're just getting ready to start our first families.
That's great. It's just a matter of making sure that opportunity is available to everybody in the ward, even if they can't afford the food or afford to.
Well, we have one of the members of the, I guess he's the assistant ward mission leader, and he does the calendar for the actives. And
they pass it around Relief Society or Elders Quorum, right? Uh-huh.
Yeah. So we're going to coordinate so that we don't conflict there. But I'm just trying to focus on the inactives and part member families.
Well, that's fantastic. I think it's a brilliant idea. I mean, fantastic. So tell me, just like, what comes to mind? Just what's your typical Sunday like? I mean, you say at times you sort of just sit, drop back a little bit and not put yourself out there too much. But is there any routines you go through as far as maintaining your engagement in leadership in the Word?
Mostly, I'm just, as our group talked this afternoon, one of the things that has struck me in studying the New Testament this year is about how names were very important to Jesus. And so I've pounded on my Elders Quorum president, everybody in the quorum should know everybody else's name. And it's not going too good.
We'll get there.
Delete that.
I like it. And how big is your quorum?
We have
average attendance or whatever.
Probably 40, 50.
Okay.
Maybe. We've got
good sized quorum.
Good sized quorum.
Yeah. No, and we were talking in one session, Jessica Johnson was facilitating, and we were talking about the leadership traits of Christ, right? And then we shared some of our answers, and you said something that was like so powerful. You said, one of the traits of leadership, and correct me if I'm off here, that one of the traits of leadership is that Christ knew people's name and changed their name.
Right.
And I thought, oh my goodness, Christ knows my name and he's changed my name. Like, that's so powerful. Like, because he recognizes your identity today, and then he'll give you a more dynamic, endowed identity later.
Right.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Any other ideas, George? What are we missing?
Well, let's see. We're going to, I'm looking for a lady that bakes bread, and we're going to have one of the youth assigned for a period of time long enough that they can learn to bake bread. And my goal is to bake 6 or 7 loaves. We'll do one for sacrament, one for the youth that's helping, and then give 3 or 4 loaves to the Elders Quorum president and have him assign some ministers to take that bread that week and go out and deliver it.
Lovely. Building Zion, right?
Yeah, food's the answer.
When in doubt, go with food. All right. Usually I don't have this all these co-hosts of mine in the room. What question am I missing? Or anybody want to ask George a question about his journey, his experience? And you got to come and speak into the mic, because the rest of the world needs to hear you, Adam. So, and you got to say who you are, where you're from, if you want. But
yes, I'm Adam Salisbury from West Jordan, Utah. And so, George, my question for you is, did you ever have an idea or anything that was not taken well by a bishop? And what was the idea? How did it go? And how did the bishop respond? And then how did you handle it?
Great question.
Well, not too much. I mean, I don't really remember, but I know that there have been ideas that I have presented that they didn't like. Mostly people are sort of afraid of the handbook. And if it's not in the handbook, it's really tough for them.
Because they almost if it's not there, maybe we shouldn't do it. Because if we should do it, it should be there, right?
Right.
And that's a trap for sure.
And I keep telling them, I think it's hard for some people to separate the gospel from policy. And as we can see, since President Nelson has been the prophet, all sorts of policies are changing. And the gospel is still true, and I never try to change the gospel. But the policies, if it's going to build unity, bring us closer together, create more unity, then we should try it.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, these aren't, every idea you share, these are not radical approaches to anything. They're service-minded. They're, innovative and
certainly different. Yeah. But difference is good.
Yeah. Are there others, maybe around your age in your ward or maybe in your peer group or whatever what encouragement would you give to that group? That any other encouragement come to mind?
Well, I think that you just, you have to find like-minded people. I don't expect to find anybody as far out in left field as I am, but, they can take a little piece of it. We've started a men's group. Tell me about this. The eligibility is being over 40 and single, and
within your ward.
Within our ward.
Okay.
So I found somebody who's he's fits the category, and he's interested in taking just that little piece. And that's the way you put it together, is to find people that will just accept a small bit of the idea and run with that. And that's been very successful. I haven't really gone out, because we were just released the 1st of October from our mission. I really haven't gotten out into the far reaches to talk to people who really haven't been around a lot.
And so the idea is to gather this specific demographic, and then what are you going to do? Have gatherings or get-togethers, or?
I think the idea is to have a wide variety of choices, because one thing, not everybody's going to sign up for Worm Grummy.
I'd be there, George.
But, the different things. And I think service is key, finding ways that we can be of service. People like to be of service. And most of them don't, know how to do it. And so we're going to just try to focus on a lot of little programs that will coalesce and bring us all together.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to that community concept. You're gathering community, or in other words, you're gathering Zion, right?
Right.
You're creating Zion in your area. Any other question from the audience? Come up, Robbie. Who are you? Where are you from?
I'm Robbie Shack from New Braunfels, Texas.
Nice.
And so, George, as you talk, you say you're 87 years old, but you have lived your life in a way that I think we'd all agree that you have 870 years of experience in those 87 years. And so, and you talk about giving lots of ideas to your current leaders. If you could give any advice, not to your current leaders in your ward, but to the future leaders of the church, what advice would you give?
Ooh, that's a big one. One of them, I just really can't stress how important I think names are. And I think that we need to focus on learning names. And I liked what was said last night by Brother Strong.
Yeah,
right.
Jeff Strong.
About instead of Brother Smith, it should be Brother Al. First names, I mean, we don't address our friends by, "Good day, Mr. Smith." You address them by their first name. And I think that that's really important. People, this is one of my other driving forces is there was a survey that showed 2 out of 3 people in America are lonely. And the Surgeon General published this big, thick thing about loneliness crisis and how loneliness is actually killing more people than smoking did.
Wow.
In England, they have appointed the minister of loneliness.
Oh, really? I was not aware of that. Wow.
So it's a problem. And I think that we need to find all kinds of ways to make people feel accepted. And I mean, if you think about it, if you walk into a building and everybody greets you and how's, Sarah, and how's the dog doing, and who's going to leave something like that? And it's up to us to create that atmosphere. Then I think it will really help and go a long way to creating Zion.
Powerful. Any other questions? Who are you and where are you from?
Hi, I'm Donnell Quinn. I'm from Arizona, and I've loved getting to talk to George these few days. So thank you for being here. You've changed my life. He told me that he's been assigned to reach out and find all the people on the records that the bishop doesn't know about. And I think you told me there's 950 of them.
950.
And he's been assigned to find them. So I'm just curious how you're going to do that. I'm certain you're going to. I
have no doubt it's going to happen.
I'm just wondering what your plan is for that.
So the first step is we've had a couple who have been serving an MLS mission in our ward part-time. So I'm meeting with them on Thursday, and we're going to go over all of the information that they've gathered over the 2 years. And that'll sort of serve as a base. I found a young man in our ward who has some disability. I'm not sure what it is, but he likes computers, and I'm going to train him to become the tracer of lost persons so that we can use the internet. And somebody gave me an idea today. We do have someone in the ward who is an ex-intelligence officer. And he was telling me how he had tracked down some people. And so he's got some skills. And so we're going to use those skills to help track down the people to find out, it's the list says 950, but we know that there's not 950 people out there. And so we'll...
Because they've either moved or...
They moved, they died, whatever.
Yeah.
And so we'll narrow that list down, and the rest of it's just going to be a lot of legwork.
Yeah, and I'll get you this info later. But This was a big concern in the ward where I served as bishop. We were in a very transient ward, a lot of people coming and going. So naturally, this unknown list builds up. And so what a lot of bishoprics do typically is maybe around the end of the year, Christmas, they'll send out a letter, right, in the mail, and they'll announce the new church times and wish everybody Merry Christmas, whatever. And then they get the letters back and they know, okay, this person's moved. Often they have a forwarding address, but that's a lot of stamps and it can be a big dent on the word admin budget. And so there's services out there. There's a company called Melissa Data, and I don't know if they're still in business, but there's definitely others where they have a system for like $15. You can submit a spreadsheet of addresses and they go out and hit the mail forwarding database, which is public data. And then it bounces back with all of these addresses here's the new address. So, and it's really cheap that way. So
that's neat.
Yeah. So you're looking at that. So any other questions? Yeah. It's on. Yeah.
Hi,
okay.
I'm Jessica. During this conference, I made a comment on the first day about how it's easy to play small as a woman in the church when you have to take all of your requests through priesthood leaders. And you made it a point to find me after the meeting and 1, ask me about my experience, and then 2, gave me some great advice. Do you remember what that was?
You're the president. You've got the keys. Do the work.
I love that. And that was very powerful. How can we elevate women's voices in our ward?
Well, I heard something at the table tonight about having the Relief Society president and the Elders Quorum president sitting on the stand during a sacrament meeting. I think that would be good. We need to publicly display, the roles and their importance. And certainly the Relief Society president needs to be recognized.
Awesome. Love it. Well, George, I guess as we wrap up here, just a few things that come to mind. Just like this retreat experience, like being with your people. And I'm honored that I'm one of your people, like that we're kindred spirits. And I want to grow up to be George, right? And you inspire me. So like, what is this, anything else you'd say as far as what this means to you to just be with other leaders?
I think the thing that I've gotten a lot of ideas. I looked at the ideas, and I think it's important to know that there are other people that are trying to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard when you feel like you're the only one. And I think that are we going to do this next year?
I only if you'll come, George. So
I think it's something that's needed because we are swimming upstream, and it takes a lot to be able to try to implement, all of this. I mean, look at the difficulty the Savior had in trying to, create a Zion. And it's going to take a lot of work, but I think it has to be done.
Yeah. And
the more we can communicate with each other and support each other, I think the better off our results will be.
Yeah. Love it. As I think back on this interaction, like what I found most inspiring is you just like being willing to meet with your bishop and just say like, don't count me out. Like I'm not old. I can still give.
Right.
And like that's like so inspiring. Is that a formal appointment you said? An email in the hallway? You mentioned that, or like?
No, I go to the office.
You get in that room and
I get in the room. I want him to know that I'm serious.
Yeah.
And when we moved back to Florida, my wife and I both went in.
Yeah.
And we said that we're here to do something. We want to do something. Oh, it was an interesting story. So we renewed our temple recommend and then went to the stake. And this was just like maybe, I guess, not even a month, I think, after we had moved back to Florida. And we went then to the stake for the second part of the interview. And the stake president was about halfway through the questions with me. And he stopped and said, "Would you stay afterwards so we could talk for a few minutes?" Oh. So that's when he called us on our mission. So
awesome.
Then we had something to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Well, thank you, George. I sprung this on you. It's not like I've been planning for weeks. George will be here. Well, we got to interview him, but definitely it was meant to be. And I'm just going to throw this in here. You said as you were walking on stage, you were having a tough time coming up the stairs here, and you said you fell down the stairs on Monday.
On Monday morning.
And it's like on your this Monday.
This Monday. Yeah,
and it's Tuesday. But you still but you got nothing's broken, doctor, right? I mean,
well, I don't know, but I don't want to find out until after the conference is over.
You don't need one of your colleagues telling you can't go to a conference, right? Well,
right.
Wow. What sacrifice. I mean, and so it's just an honor to have you here. So
thank you very much.
All right. Last question I have for you. As you reflect back on 87 years of being a leader, how has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
Well, if you're going to really lead, you gotta walk the walk. And it's, you have to think about it. This year in studying the Come Follow Me program and listening to some of the podcasts and the YouTube videos, I made the decision that I'm one of those persons, I love the to-do list. I've got a to-do list every day. But I first got kind of tuned into it. I think it was Brother Rogers who gave a talk, to be or to do. And I decided then I needed to work more on the to be. And then this year, listening, I've decided I want to become a disciple and not just a follower. And that's, if you make that commitment, you have to make some changes, and it changes your priorities.
The end. That's it for this Leading Saints episode. I encourage you to check out some of the most popular episodes of the podcast that we list at the bottom of the show notes. If you haven't listened to all of those, do so now. And remember, to get on the email newsletter list, simply go to leadingsaints.org/14.
It came as a result of the position of leadership which was imposed upon us by the God of heaven, who brought forth a restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And when the declaration was made concerning the only true and living church upon the face of the earth, we were immediately put in a position of loneliness, the loneliness of leadership, from which we cannot shrink nor run away, and to which we must face up with boldness and courage and ability.